The wind screamed across the empty plains of Willow Creek that night, dragging with it the taste of snow and the promise of something cruel. The town sat like a scar on the land, a few wooden buildings leaning against the cold, lanterns flickering in the biting wind. Behind the saloon, in the open square, voices rose, angry, drunken, certain. They had found someone to blame again. Her name was Mara, though few in town ever used it. To them, she was half-blood, the girl who didn't belong anywhere. Her father had been a settler, her mother from the tribes, who lived beyond the ridge. After both parents died, she had learned to live on scraps, sewing clothes for miners, cleaning stalls, and sleeping in the barn behind the blacksmith's shed. She spoke little, but her eyes carried stories deeper than the canyons. That evening, as the storm gathered, a fire had broken out near the feed store. No one knew how it started, but the crowd needed someone to blame. By the time Mara arrived with a bucket of water, they were already whispering her name. The sheriff was gone on patrol, and the deputy, a man who hated her since childhood, took control of the mob. She brought this curse. One woman cried. Just like her mother's people, they bring fire and ruin. Mara tried to speak, but her voice trembled too softly to cut through the shouts. The wind carried her words away. Someone grabbed her arm. Another tore the shawl from her shoulders. Fear burned through her, but she stood tall, refusing to cry. She had done nothing wrong. The deputy's face was red and mean under the lantern glow. "We can't let her bring more trouble," he spat. "You all know what happens when we don't act." They dragged her toward the big oak tree at the edge of town, the one where warnings were made. The branches were thick with snow, bowing low like arms heavy with sorrow. Mara stumbled through the mud, the cold biting her bare feet, her heart pounding in disbelief. She looked to the faces around her. People she had helped, children she had fed, all looking back with fear or hatred. And then the sound of hooves. At first it was faint, lost under the howl of the wind. But it grew louder, heavier, until every head turned. A horse burst from the white curtain of snow. Tall, dark, and fierce, its rider cloaked against the storm. The crowd froze as the man dismounted, his boots sinking into the slush. His coat was dusted with snow, his face shadowed beneath a wide hat, but his voice carried like thunder. "What in God's name are you doing?" he demanded. It was Luke Carver, the rancher from the North Ridge, a man known for his quiet strength and fierce fairness. He owned the Carver Ranch, miles of open land where lost souls sometimes found a second chance. He wasn't a man who meddled in town affairs until now. The deputy stiffened. "This ain't your business, Carver." Luke's gaze swept the crowd, settling on Mara, shivering in the snow. "Looks like you're making it my business," he said coldly. "She's one of them," someone shouted. "You don't know what she's done." Luke stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "What she's done? I see a girl half frozen and scared out of her wits. I see cowards hiding behind a rope instead of facing the truth." His hand went to the coiled whip on his saddle, not as a threat, but as a reminder of the strength he carried. The deputy sneered. "You'd take her side over your own kind?" Luke's voice dropped low, steady as iron. "My kind are the ones who still know right from wrong." For a hot beat, no one moved. Snow began to fall in thick white sheets, covering the footprints, silencing the world. Mara's breath came in small, visible clouds. Then Luke stepped closer, removing his coat. Without a word, he wrapped it around her shoulders. The heavy wool swallowed her small frame. "You're safe now," he murmured. The mob murmured in confusion, but something in his tone, calm, certain, unyielding, broke the spell of anger. One by one, people began to turn away, muttering. The deputy glared, but even he stepped back when Luke's cold eyes met his. Luke placed a hand on Mara's shoulder. "Come on," he said. "You don't belong here anymore." She looked up at him, unsure if this was another cruel trick, but his gaze was steady, the first look of kindness she'd seen in years. Together they walked toward his horse, the storm swallowing them whole. Behind them, the oak tree stood silent, the wind tugging at its branches as if sighing in relief. The snow never seemed to end that night. It fell like feathers from a torn sky, swallowing the road ahead and muffling every sound but the creak of leather and the rhythmic breath of Luke's horse. Mara clung to his coat, her fingers trembling from cold and disbelief. She didn't know where he was taking her, only that for the first time in years. She wasn't running from something, she was being taken away to safety. Luke said little. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the horizon, scanning the storm for danger. The lantern tied to his saddle swayed, casting faint gold circles on the snow. After what felt like hours, a dim light appeared through the blizzard, the outline of a house on a hill, surrounded by dark pines. "That's home," Luke said quietly. The ranch house stood solid and wide, built of weathered timber and faith. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth. When they reached the porch, Luke dismounted and lifted Mara gently from the horse. Her legs were weak, but his arms steadied her. Inside, the air smelled of pinewood and coffee. A fire burned in the hearth, its light dancing across the wooden floor. Luke hung his coat and turned to her. "Sit by the fire. You're shaking." Mara hesitated, unused to kindness, then obeyed. She stretched her hands toward the flames, watching the frost melt from her sleeves. For a moment, she was afraid to breathe too deeply, afraid the warmth might vanish if she dared to believe it was real. Luke poured her a cup of coffee and handed it to her. "It's strong," he warned, "but it'll warm you." She nodded and took a sip. It burned her throat, but the heat spread through her chest, steadying her heartbeat. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered finally. Luke leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I couldn't stand by and watch them destroy someone who'd done nothing wrong." Her eyes lifted to his, cautious. "You don't even know me. I know enough," he said, "and I've seen that kind of hate before. Once it starts, it doesn't stop until someone says no." The fire crackled. Outside, the storm began to quiet, as though the night itself was listening. After a while, Mara looked down at her hands. "They'll come for me again," she said softly. "They always do." Luke walked to the window and stared out at the snow. "Let them try. You're under my roof now. Nobody touches what's mine." The words hung in the air, not possessive but protective, steady as an oath. Mara looked up sharply. For the first time in her life, she saw someone who wasn't afraid to stand beside her. He turned back, his expression softer now. "You can stay here until you find your footing. There's plenty of work around the ranch. The cook left last week, and the horses always need care. You'll earn your keep, fair and honest." Her lips trembled in something close to a smile. "I can work," she said quickly. "I'm not afraid of it. I didn't think you were." For a long time, neither spoke. The wind tapped softly at the window. The storm had passed, but inside the room, something new had begun. Something fragile, like hope learning to breathe again. Later, when Luke brought a blanket and showed her to the small guest room down the hall, Mara paused in the doorway. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. He studied her face, the question hanging between them. Then he said quietly, "Because once, someone helped me when I didn't deserve it either. I've spent my life trying to repay that debt." She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "Then maybe I can help you repay it." Luke gave a faint smile. "Get some rest first. We'll start at dawn." When he left, Mara stood by the small window, watching the snow settle over the dark fields. For years the world had been cruel and cold. But tonight, in the house on the hill, warmth flickered in the darkness. She whispered a quiet prayer, not of fear, but of gratitude. Outside, the wind carried her words across the ranch like a promise: no storm lasts forever.